Hey everyone, and welcome to the Fit Fatherhood Live on Tuesday nights. My name is Zach Bush, and today we are talking about flexibility and mobility. Now, I'm here with my co-host Nathaniel, and let me ask you, Nathaniel, how often do you hear dads say, I'm too stiff for that, or when they're picking up their kids or playing with them, or when they bend down, they have to tie their shoes. You hear the groan, right, and the struggle. You see it or you hear it. You know, how often do you hear that? How often do you see that in your life?
Probably too often, very often. It's funny as you were saying that I forget what the comedian is, but he made a joke about when his daughter was growing up, he would bend down and touch his toes and he'd make a groan. And so as she got older and she started to touch her toes, she would make the groan too because she thought
Mm.
that's just what you did. Um, but I countless times hear people say like, they're walking around and they're acting like they're sore, like they just went to the gym the day before, and you ask them, oh yeah, how, what's going on with that? And they're like, oh, I just played on the mat with my kids for like 10 minutes yesterday, and now my back's all tweaked or something like that. And like, man, uh, it does happen to me. um, Typically mine after I've slept for like 8 hours, like, man, my neck's all messed up. But um, I hear too many times dads are saying, "Yeah, I tweaked this playing with my kids," or "Yeah, I was wrestling on the floor. I was throwing the ball out in the backyard with my kids, and now I'm sore. My shoulders are sore." It's like, well, how do we get in front of this, right? As we're moving into our older age. I know you're a little bit younger than me. I'm 40 now. You can see I just shaved this morning. Finally, hoof. You can see the grays typically.
I shaved like 3 days ago, so that's
Yeah,
kind of the first
yeah.
time.
It was bad. It had been over like 10 days, but how do we prolong this, prolong our livelihood, prolong our athleticism, our ability to bend down and pick up the kids, play with the kids, throw the ball. We joke about this all the time, but like, I want to be able to dominate my kids in sports for as long as possible, right? And in my opinion, a big part of this is working on our mobility and working on our flexibility through stretching. Um, and so, yeah, that's my opinion on that. So, yeah, I mean, is that something that you're hearing a lot? I would assume. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's in both, kind of areas of my life is, work, right? I mean, I'm an office job every day, so it's a lot of
Yeah.
sitting. Now, I have a standing desk, and I kind of led the revolution at my company to start getting standing desks because, like, I was getting hunched over, my hip flexors were tight, like all of the stuff that you hear about how bad sitting is for you. And I think I heard a thing that said that sitting is the new smoking of, like, 30
Mm,
years ago where smoking was, and now it's just sitting, right? Because, like,
yeah.
we're sitting all the time. I mean, if you work a desk job, you're sitting at least 40 hours a week. So,
Yeah.
you get tight with your hip flexors, and that heart, starts hurting your low back. And so that you hear it a lot in the office, kind of people walking around, and you can kind of see them as they're walking, right? Maybe they're getting up to go to the bathroom. You kind of just see the stiffness going through, and that translates to, going home with the kids. And
Yeah.
so, I hear it there. And then even at the gym, right? Being active at the gym, a lot of people just forget about or don't want to do the mobility. I know I hate stretching and doing all of that, but it's important, especially as you get older. When I was 20, I could jump in, no warm up, I could leave, no issues, right? But as I
Yeah.
got into my mid late 20s, and now that I'm in my early 30s, like, I need to stretch more often, or I should be stretching more often. It's just not the sexy part of the working
Right.
out in the gym, so it's hard to do. But yeah, I see it, I hear it all the time, and I struggle
Yeah.
with it myself.
Yeah. Um, and we're, I guess, by the end of this half an hour or so ish, we've already kind of touched on the why this is important. We'll touch on it. We'll go into slightly more detail on why mobility and flexibility is important, especially as we're getting into our mid to later life. Right? We're going to give some actual stretches here. We're not in the super capability to show them so much as we'll just kind of walk them through audibly, but specifically to people that are spending their time in front of a desk, sitting down, even standing, I notice I do a lot of standing, and at certain times of the day, my lower back will start to hurt just because I've been standing stagnant. So what can we do to compensate for that, to adjust, and the little tips and tricks that we have along the way? And you know, these are just like the very basics. We want to just start with the basic stuff. I like to actually combine the mobility and flexibility with strength things through more like yoga poses, things like that, where you're working on um, extending through the range, but also through your strength. So as we move in here, or as we move on out of these, more basic stuff, that's when we'll get into the more advanced stuff. But why mobility? Because as we're kind of getting older, we naturally will start to lose. I'm moving my knees, like you can see that. I'm gonna use my arm here. Like we'll start to lose the range of motion, and it's when we become stiff and we don't have full range of motion that falling starts to occur, and we'll lose the ability to be able to reach out and grab for things because our range of motion, our mobility is limited. And so especially as we're aging, as we're getting into our golden years, having that mobility, the ability to be able to move our joints in full ranges of motion, or as close to that full range of motion, is paramount, right? I also, we talk about grip strength a lot as we're getting older too, like being able to reach out and grab onto a chair or a table. Again, I'm grabbing onto the chair, like you can see that, but it's one of the biggest contributors to people falling, is losing their grip strength, losing their mobility, losing their flexibility, which is the ability of our muscles to stretch and contract back, right? You think flexibility, like a rubber band, over time loses its elasticity. The same thing happens with our muscles and our body if we're not focusing on that as we're coming through our, like you said, middle ages. Like, you're 20, you're freaking in your teens into your 20s, you're like, oh, I'm invincible, like nothing's gonna hurt me. I go snowboarding on zero sleep. But as you're moving into your 30s, your late 30s, now into your 40s, like, no, I got to focus on this stuff, because if I don't, like, it's very easy to tweak something, and now I'm out and I'm ineffective, and that's not what we want. We want to be fit fathers, and that's the fathers part's the important part here, is that if we're hurt, if we're immobile, how the heck are we going to help take care of the kids, take care of the household? So is there anything you want to add to any of that? Hey, you're clear as day on my end now.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's all accurate. That's all right. And it's better to start it sooner than to wait until it starts to become an issue. I know it's hard to address that because it's like, oh, I feel fine, I'm moving fine, I'm loose. Like I was, after I was just putting my son's pajamas on after his bath time, and he was like completely bent forward, like the hand, there was like, it was crazy, just like the flexibility that he's a year and a half old that they have, and that goes away very quickly, especially as we start sitting more, like even getting kids in school sitting all day. If you can start it sooner before it becomes an issue, it's only going to help you in the long run. And not even just for like when you're 60 or 70, but right now, as we're talking about being dads and kind of working through this, but to be able to be more mobile for your kids and your grandkids. That's why we're doing it, right? Don't think about necessarily just you. A lot of this is, hey, we're going to be selfish for improving ourselves, through health and fitness and nutrition, but that selfishness is really for our spouse and our kids. So just remembering that starting before it's actually needed is better. And why are you ultimately doing it? Because it kind of get boring, right? It's not the most fun thing in the world, but it's super important to do. And, a lot of people are dealing with the same things, same areas that are being tight, right? Their hips, low back, hamstring, shoulder, and spine. And the nice thing is it doesn't need to take up a ton of time, right? Talk about being time efficient, right? Everybody's got the same 24 hours in a day. How can I do some of these and fit them in with things I'm already doing? It doesn't need to be this whole half-hour routine. We're going to talk about some stretches that are like 30 seconds at a time. Can we do it while we're standing at a desk in a meeting? How many, I'm sitting on Teams meetings, and it's like I'm sitting at my standing desk. Like I can grab my foot and do a quad stretch. I can kind of do some of these other stretches while I'm sitting there.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking on the phone or watching an episode of TV. It's okay to watch TV, an hour of that. Let's get on the floor and let's do some stretches. So, addressing some of those common areas, but how can we combine and be more time efficient? Get the kids involved, right? They don't need to stretch, and they'll do it with you and they'll have fun. You talked about
Yeah.
how the daughter was copying her dad from just him groaning and bending over. She didn't need to do that, but she was just learning from him. So if it's something you
Yeah.
can start doing for yourself, bring in the family, do it while you're having fun. I think that will help make something that's not fun at least a little bit more enjoyable and a little bit more bonding, which is ultimately what we want, is to combine how can we get health and fitness and career and family and kind of meld those all together to kind of build on each other.
Yeah. That kind of goes back to a previous week where you were talking about kind of combining two activities, right? The kids get a kick out of it. They get to be on the floor with dad, and just rolling around and doing their little stretches. Yeah, they're gonna not do them exactly the same way, but they're gonna have fun and they're gonna make it their own. And I did want to say, like, while this is fit fatherhood, it does apply to everybody, even if you're not a father, right? Staying mobile and staying flexible through your years still is applicable, right? We just have a community where we're very hyper focused on helping dads out because that's something we're passionate about. You mentioned a few pain points, areas that are common. Is there one that you kind of hear the most from people that you've worked with? Like, man, I'm just going to give those examples again. My back is the worst. My neck, my shoulder, my hips. What is the kind of most common one that you hear?
There's two.
Okay.
It's low back and it's shoulders. I would say low back is more common just because there's more things that can cause it. Shoulders tend to be more of an issue when you're already kind of lifting weights and being more active. That's when the shoulder happens. But low back is typically from tight hips, tight hamstrings, or weak glutes, which comes from anybody just sitting too much or anything like that. So the low back, I would say, is the biggest thing. A PT friend of mine who's my PT, he does workshops with our gym and with me, and those are the two. He's like always those two, and mainly low back is the big one.
Yeah. Well, that's what I experienced as well, or and experienced with the other people that I talk to and I help out. So we have a few specifically targeting your lower back and your hamstrings, because like you said, the hamstrings do play into your lower back. I mean, your hip flexors do as well, but which we have some exercises for, or some stretches for as well. The first one being, well, I guess they're all, like I said, pretty beginner. The first one that I like to do, I typically would do my stretches kind of first thing in the morning. I've been doing them at night right now because that's what my schedule is permitting, is cat cow. Now, we don't have the ability to show them. I didn't want to pull from somebody else's channel to share on this, and deal with licensing kind of issues or anything like that. So we're going to walk through them. If you were to type just like cat cow stretch into Google, you will very easily find that stuff. If you're a part of our Fit Fatherhood community on School, which is free to join if you want to come join us, the links for that will be in the description. We are going to have videos of us performing these, or potentially maybe PDFs or something, of all these. But would you like to explain kind of what the cow is, so we can kind of visualize in our head what this looks like?
Yeah, so you'll start on all fours, so knees and feet, and then hands on the ground. So think of like a push-up position, except your knees are on the ground. And then as you inhale, you're going to tuck that chin down towards that chest. You're going to press up against the floor, and you're going to round that back, right? It needs to be active, so we don't just need to push the back up, right? We want to press through the floor, get those shoulders active, and then pressing that belly button up towards the sky, and just hold that for a second, right? And slowly work into that. Don't just shoot everything up at one shot, right?
Yeah.
Slow, like these are supposed to be slow and controlled. And so it's slowly pressing through the floor of the hands, right? Your knees are still just sitting on the ground, right? And then you're tucking that chin down. And then so that's the cat. And then as you exhale, you're going to drop that belly button to the floor, and then you're going to open up and look forward as you work through it. Again, inhale up and then exhale down, just slowly working through those. You can almost think of it too, like when I was having back issues, my PT said, like, work through each segment of the spine. So kind of slowly and intentionally feel, like you won't feel it, but pretend that you can kind of roll each segment of that spine up or down, and just slowly working through that will get that spine nice and loosened up. And it's a nice one to just go through slowly. You could do probably 5 or 6 reps going cat cow for a couple of sets. They don't take very long to do. It's just
Yep.
slow and controlled, maybe a couple seconds for each one. So you're talking a minute or two of work to go through a few sets of those.
Yeah, not like this is one of my favorite ones to just kind of start the day with. Like you've been laying. For me, I'm either on my back or on my stomach. I know you're not supposed to sleep on your stomach, but it's just how I can fall asleep. And like to be able to start the day with just some spine flexibility and mobility, it really kind of starts the day off right for me. I did want to add too, when you're in that fours position, like make sure to the best of our ability, our knees are going to be under our hips and our hands are going to be under our shoulders. So you don't
Yeah.
want to be like way out here. And that's just good positioning for our body, our biometrics. One of my favorite ones to just do throughout the day is literally just bending over at the waist and hanging. You think of like a hamstring stretch where like try to bend over and touch the floor. That's not what this is. This is just letting your body again slowly, like Zach was saying about the cat cow, slowly dangle. I'll hold my hands like this and just kind of like let yourself go. And you will find yourself as you allow this to take time, 10, 15, 30 seconds in, you'll see that you'll start to gain a little bit more stretch. You'll feel your back start to loosen up. And you can even add in just a slight like rock to the side, back and forth, just gentle. We want to be really gentle, especially when we're starting these things out. Yeah, eventually we're going to reach down and we're going to put our palms on the floor. We're going to be able to like reach way behind us, but that's not what we're starting out doing. We're starting these just really gentle. When again, like sometimes you mentioned on a meeting, like I'm on a call.
Yeah.
I'm still engaged in the call. You just don't see me for a second, right? It depends on who I'm talking to, of course. But like, we're in between calls. I'm just gonna let this thing stretch out for a second because if I'm just standing here for a couple hours in a row on different Zooms and different calls, or I'm like comping properties and underwriting properties, like I've been standing pretty stagnant. That back starts to get stiff from just being here. So let's stretch it out. Let's move it out. This kind of leads us into the I think we have oh no we do have one more on the back side of things, which is a little bit more strengthening the lower back, but it's also working the cow side of the flexibility, which is I didn't know what to call it exactly, so I call it like the Superman pose.
That's what we call
um,
it. It's like a
yeah, laying on your you take it.
Oh yeah. So we actually do this with the PVC, but you don't necessarily need to do that.
Yeah,
So you're lying face down, and what you do is your arms are out above your head, so you're lying flat on the floor, and we're just slightly lifting up those hands and chests and feet off of the ground. Now it's not. Let's see how high we can arch everything. It's not necessarily about height. We want length as well. So just slowly lifting up just the slightest bit, and then working on that stretch and holding, right? So we want to, just like Nathaniel's got
yeah,
his hand kind of arched like that. So we want to drive, squeeze those glutes, and then drive that belly button into the floor, and just slight lift with a nice stretch, and hold that for a couple of seconds, and then release,
yeah.
right? It's inhale and then exhale up, and then release again. So do that for 5 reps, for 2 to 3 seconds for each. You could do a couple rounds of that. It won't take too long, and that's a really nice way to get the core active and to kind of help loosen up that spine a little bit.
Yeah, and like I know that a lot of at least my issues that I've had where I like have soreness or pain that's lingering, it is either imbalance or weakness. And like
Yes.
for back pain, this is a great one because you're strengthening that lower back as well as providing movement in a range that we're not normally doing. Like you'll see people sometimes go like, "Oh, my back hurts," right? And that's exactly why. Like you got to get you're weak there, and so we got to strengthen that area. This one's a great one for that. There are some shoulder ones that I would do in this same position on the floor that we're not going to talk about here. But you did mention lower back and shoulders,
Mhm.
and this next one for me is like again, it's a one that I do throughout the day. I didn't know what to call it again, so I kind of called it like good mornings. I can almost display this one for us, but we like reach our hands to the sky, and I like to make a big circle with my arms going up. And then my idea for getting my shoulders worked out is really pressing my elbows like I'm up, like I'm trying to touch a wall behind me. So I'm going to press my elbows back and just work myself all the way down. And I can feel the stretching going on in my shoulders. I have cracking and little popping because when we're sitting in front of our computers, which we do a lot of, or even on your phone, I don't have my phone on you, but like we end up rolling our shoulders forward, and we're hunched forward. And I lose the terminology for this, like anterior, yeah, versus posterior.
Yeah, posterior's
Yeah.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like what we got to do, we end up having this forward rotation in our shoulders is work them out, work them backwards. And which leads me into another great shoulder one is literally just doing shoulder circles and taking a big, I like to think of as I'm doing the circle, I'm going to breathe in one direction. And when I get to the top, I'm going to breathe out. And I'm going to do that 3 to 5 times, and then I'm going to rotate and I'm going to do it back the other way. Again, breathing in on the up and out on the down. Um, those are the ones, those are my favorite ones to do for shoulders. Again, we're talking about mobility and flexibility. And so this one, I mean, that's a full range of motion for us. We can talk about doing shoulder circles, arm circles and things like that. But do you have any that you'd like to add to the shoulder ones? Because, in my opinion, those are pretty.
Yeah, so I like the one what you have. You could even do it back up against the wall, kind of reinforce, making sure we're externally rotating everything and working that rotator cuff a little bit. So having that stimulus of that wall being back against you. The other one is kind of similar in it's a doorway stretch. So you literally have each hand, your elbows at 90 degrees, and you go on each side of the doorway, and we just slowly lean into it, right? Maybe if you have shorter arms, you can just do one side at a time. But making sure we get that nice equal stretch so you can kind of sit there. That just helps open up the chest, which helps open up everything. You mentioned being tight and round with the back. That'll help open up things coming through the front.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, getting that stretch out through your upper chest opens up the shoulders as well. And then kind of rounding this all out, I know we did mention these play a part in back pain. They do play a part in knee pain too. That's why we included this one as like our top 5 or 6, however many we're at stretches right now, which is our hip flexors. How would you walk us through that one?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways that you can do it. There's 2 ways that I do it. And yes, hip flexors, they connect down in through to your inner thigh, knee, and then all the way up to into the low spine. So sometimes the low back pain actually is coming from the hip flexor. Mine, that's where my pain was, but mine wasn't even necessarily because the hip flexor was tight. That's part of it, but because my right side glute and hamstring were weaker than my left side, so I was compensating. So the right hamstring had to do more work, and that's why the low back issues are not simple. But
right.
Hip flexor will help in general loosen things up because that's where most people are tight because you're all jammed up sitting there. So 2 ways to do the hip flexor stretch. The first one is you can put your knee on a floor in kind of like a lunge position, right? So your front leg is in that 90 degrees, your back leg is on the floor, and you're just kind of leaning forward, and you'll feel that stretch come in through the front part. Right outside the groin. So that's one way to do it. Another way, actually, I guess I have 3 ways. Another way is to put your knee on the floor and then the top of your foot up against the wall, and then lean forward. So that's a deeper stretch. That's probably I would say a level 2 stretch.
Yeah,
from
a little bit more advanced.
That lunge.
Yeah.
But because you can kind of move your knee further away from the wall, get a little bit less stretch. But I would say that's like a level 2. When the lunge thing kind of reaches that limit, you can move to the wall. And then another one I like it because it's also kind of a groin stretch too. It's called a Spider-Man. It's always been my favorite stretch. It's like one of the first stretches I learned when I started doing CrossFit. So you start in a push-up plank position. So your hands are underneath your shoulders and you're at the top part of a push-up. And then what you do is you step your foot out to the outside of your hand. So one foot is forward, the other one's back. So it's similar to that lunge position, except you're getting a stretch in through that groin in the front leg and then really nice long stretch in the back leg. And then what you can either do is hold that for a second or two. You could open up and rotate towards that front leg to kind of help open up that spine. Or you could hold it there and do circles. So pretend your like knee is going in circles around like the heel of your foot. So you can circle like 5 on each way there. And then you can switch to the other leg. Or you could just simply alternate back and forth. So
Yeah.
Spider-Mans are my favorite thing to stretch through the hip flexor and the groin. They're the best. I do them pretty much every day before I work out.
Yeah, I would. I I feel like we used to call that the sprinter stretch in track, and I would I would maybe say that that one's a little slightly not maybe as advanced stretch wise as the putting the foot up on the wall, but a little bit more advanced as far as like you have to be able to get your body into that position a little bit more. Like the lunge one is pretty, and anybody can do it. Maybe you're not getting as deep as Zach might with the first times you're going around, but just getting into your lunge position and thinking about driving your hips forward, and that's where you're really getting your stretch in that hips. And like he said, you're going to start to feel it in whichever leg is backwards. That's the one that you're really going to start to feel. That kind of rounds up the stretching portion. And I did want to say too, as you were talking about your issues, while these stretches are great in general terms, this is no replacement for going and seeing a actual physical therapist that knows what they're doing. Because just as Zach said, like, you go into a physical therapist and you say, hey, this is my issue, they're going to run you through a gauntlet of things, testing your strength and your flexibility in a bunch of different positions. And then they are able to diagnose through those tests, hey, this is what we need to work on. Right. So these are just starting points for you. And there's plenty of other stretches and exercises and things that we have that from our knowledge, from our experience, we can offer to you. But if what we're doing, if you're ever feeling any pain, like not stretching pain, you have to kind of know your body. This is what it kind of gets difficult, just knowing yourself and knowing your limitations. But like, if you ever feel real pain, you got to stop these things. And you either need to go take it a step back and start a little bit lighter, or you need to switch and do something different, because there are variations to all of these that you can do. So do you have anything to add there, Zach?
I like what you said. I wanted to caveat all of this with like, hey, this is our experience. We are certainly not doctors. So, this is just what's worked for us. And on the PT side of things, I'm a proponent of physical therapy for sure. And I would prefer it over chiropractics. Because chiropractors are great, get the adjustments and all that stuff, but the PT will go run you through everything, diagnose what's really happening.
Yeah.
And on that note, like I mentioned before, being preventative, I'm going to start going to a PT probably once a year, my PT, and just have him, like, he does a general, like, comprehensive, hey, let's look at everything. Let's see how you're moving left to right and seeing all of that. So I'm going to go to him and he'll, go through all this and say, oh, your one shoulder's different than the other one. Let's do these a couple exercises. So just kind of getting that like annual checkup you would at a normal doctor, except we're going to do it for mobility and strengthening potentially, right? Because there's imbalances there. Where you're feeling the pain is not always where the issue is. It could be a weakness somewhere else. So that's the complexity where a physical therapist will be able to diagnose it and provide you with the stretches and the movements that you need to do every day and consistently to help fix that.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that input. I think I agree with the chiropractic thing. Like, it's a good thing, but the physical therapist is where you're going to diagnose and is going to leave you with things to go work on yourself, right? You can't chiropractic yourself.
I've tried.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I got a couple cracks right there. Take some of these, hone in on the issues that you're having, and just start doing these 5 minutes a day, like, or 5 minutes at a time. That's really all it takes. You can just do it once a day, but doing it a couple times a day, I think, is where you're going to see the most benefits and you're going to see the most relief, especially for like those issues that you're having from doing your everyday tasks, like sitting in front of a chair, or sitting in front of a computer. If you're part of our Fit Fatherhood community, we want to bring more people into it. We have one-on-one calls that we have planned as you kind of become more engaged in the community, and that's where we can really go one-on-one and tailor more stretches to you that we know. These are just the few kind of like top catch-all ones that we have. If you're not a father and you cannot, not eligible to join the community. That doesn't change. Like, we still want to be able to help as many people out. We're just both fathers. This is where our passion lies, and so that's where the community we built is around. Shoot Zach a DM at ZachBush924. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. We're both on Facebook as well, if that's the best place to reach you. If you're watching this on either of our YouTubes, put a comment in there. Stretch, mobility, and we will personally reach out to you so we can kind of help you out along the way. The school community is growing. It's been fun so far. The links for that will be in the descriptions of both our YouTube channels. Do you have anything to add before we part ways?
No, I mean, like I said, subscribe to the YouTube channels. We want to help as many people as we can. So if it's not you, send it to somebody you know. We would love to have a conversation.
Yeah. If you're a mom out there and your husband's looking a little flabby around their waist. No, I appreciate you, Zach. It's been a pleasure, brother. Until next week. See y'all.
Zero.
Geez, these kids